Hey, good morning, everybody. Good to see you all. Since some of you have not had a chance to meet me, I want you to know that this is my first time. No, I'm kidding. No, but that was scary for a minute, wasn't it? It was. Who is this guy? Oh, my. Hey, Mike, as you know, has taken a much-needed break, which I think is great, because I remember in the years of being a pastor how you really don't get a lot of breaks. I know that you guys wonder what Mike does all week. I assure you he's doing things. So, yeah, it's true. I used to get that question the most of, what do you do all week? Well, where do we start? So, okay. So he's getting a break this week, and he left me with the Bigger and Better series with the talk on money, which I'm thankful for. Because of all the talks I ever did in 17 years of being a pastor, money was my favorite. So, yes. But no, so I want to share just a few things with you this morning that I think are very good and will help all of us, but also help us as a church. Because I think we can all agree this morning that what is happening at the Journey is a good thing, and we want to see good things continue to grow and get bigger and better, right? All right. Okay. A video clip that I've always loved was from the 1992 classic with Stephen Martin called Leap of Faith. I don't know if any of you have ever seen that. So it was often perceived as a mocking of God, but in reality, throughout the movie, by the end, he becomes somebody who is very much affected by God. But one of the favorite parts that I had in there, just because it makes me giggle, is the part where he takes an offering. And you understand that he had the flair of a TV pastor and that he was all over the stage and everybody had his every word. He would walk to the front row and someone would stand up and he'd say, "Be healed," and they'd fall over. I'm sure it was because he broke their neck, but they were down and everybody was like, "Yes." And then he'd walk up to someone in a wheelchair who he knew could walk, but would lift them up and they would dance. And then by about that time, he'd walk up to someone and say, "Be healed again." And he would stand up and somehow he knew he was healed. The truth was, it was a scam and the guy just was in the moment. But by the time all these great miraculous things happened, guess what he does? "We are going to take an offering." And then these plates go up and down the rows and there's men in these very nice suits that reminds me of the IRS. And the money's flowing into these buckets, right? And then they go into the back and they're counting and it's huge amounts of money. And Steve Martin has the classic line of, "Thank you, Jesus, for creating so many suckers." Yeah. Now, I want you to think about that because I'm not so sure that the majority of the people who walk the earth don't have some kind of mindset that way. That just don't make the gap jump, if you would, from how powerful of a tool money is. Because I believe most people think that Mike has a golden goose somewhere in the office, grows magic beans that he sells on eBay, and somehow everything works out. But in reality, it just isn't that way. Why is it that we, pastors in general, I think people in general, unless you have something to boast about, are afraid to talk about money? Well, I don't kid you when I say I honestly believe money is one of the most powerful tools on earth. The truth is, for us in this room, if we had $1 billion right now, would we be feeling restricted in some way? Oh man, think of what we could do. That money is a powerful tool. I want you to know something. Since I've made the trip, though, from church world to business world, there is a more powerful force than money. Fake money. It's the money you don't have that you think you should. It's really true. People will make the craziest decisions in business because they did this and feel like they deserve that. And there's this sitting there and they just can't move forward because it belongs to me. You know, one of the most interesting interviews I ever heard was when everyone remember Barry Sanders? I know it's football, and I'm sorry to bring up football, guys, but at least it's not 49ers or Seahawks, right? He played for the Lions, and I'm sure he regrets it and asked God for a do-over. So, all right? But when he got a huge signing bonus, because I would say that he probably was, if not the best, one of the best running backs to ever play football. And he got a huge signing bonus, and he was on an interview with an ESPN broadcaster, and they said, "What are you going to do with that signing bonus?" Or, what made you decide? Because he could have left the Lions, put it that way, which, frankly, I think I would have. But Barry Sanders, bless his heart, as they would say in the South, stayed. And for staying, he got a huge signing bonus. And they says, "Why did you sign the deal?" And Barry Sanders' response was, "I really just felt like God wanted me there." And I don't think he had anything to do with what the announcer said next. But let's hear what the announcer said next. The broadcaster says, "Well, of course he wanted you to sign it. God wants his 10%. to watch Barry Sanders, ha, 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 And the announcer says, by the way, where does all that money go? Well, that's where the misconception starts. Because I think there's this idea that there's a never-ending flow of money, or that even the church doesn't deserve the money. I can remember when I was leaving Alaska, and Alaska's a beautiful place to visit, mid-June through mid-July, and then sometimes August. But we were leaving there, coming back to the Boise area to do another ministry work, and I know when we were packing up, the movers were asking me, so what do you do? He says, well, I'm a pastor. And his next words, I just never knew what to do with, because he said to me, he looked right at me, he says, man, you got to be loaded. I'm not sure which church you attend, but it is not mine. Yeah. And then, in Alaska, I think Alaska's, believe it or not, has more free spirits than Idaho. It's the only place I've ever been. I'm sure this happens in Idaho, but I would always call before going anywhere because you could meet a gun at the end of a driveway. It was crazy. But I remember I took our car to the Ford garage to just get a simple tune-up done, and they were giving me a ride back to the church office. What do you do? Well, I'm a youth pastor. I work with teens, and that's what I did in Alaska. And he says, oh, man, my parents go to church. Oh, that's great. Where do they go? So he told me the name of the church and so forth. I said, oh, that's great. And he says, but you know what's crazy about that church? No, what? And I'll give you a guess. They have to pay 10% at that place. And I said, it's like they hold a gun to their head and say, you're paying it? No, it's not like that, but it's crazy. And I'm sitting there thinking, okay. But I want you to know, I don't think that that's so far off of what even maybe some of us in this room feel like, or what the people that we interact with all week feel like. They just can't make that connection between the powerful tool of money and how important it is to what happens here. There's just that gap. And I can see why, because and maybe some of it is what we do as a church, because my first introduction to tithe was when I was in kindergarten. I rode with the lady next door to church. We went to Sunday school, and this is how I knew it worked. Is every time she would say, it's time to take the offering, and then she would get her purse out and hand everybody a quarter that was there, because we never brought money. And then she would pass the envelope around, and we all put our quarter in, and she'd say, good job, and then we got cookies. Great plan. Great plan. So you give me the quarter, I get the cookie. That works for me. All right? So it really, in all honesty, that's what I thought it was forever. I think maybe junior high or high school I started to catch on. Oh, wait a minute, there's something more here than just getting a quarter and a cookie. All right? So there was just that crazy start to that. Then, I think through my teen years, I perceived everything as some kind of scam. I know that's shocking. But the shakedown started. I had this idea that there's all this money hoarded somewhere. And I always wondered, why isn't the pastor driving a Cadillac yet? Just this idea that there's hordes of it. And then there's just that disillusionment that always seems to come in. And that disillusionment is that gap I want to talk with you about this morning. That gap between the powerful tool of money, because I don't find anywhere in the scripture in the Bible where it says, hey, money is evil. But there are ways money can be used that is very evil. But the powerful tool of money, there's a gap, and then the church who needs money. That's just the truth. The church needs money. Interesting, from Genesis to Deuteronomy, there's 613 laws that are brought up. In the modern church today, we keep 11 of them. The 10 Commandments, and we talk about tithing, right? Why did all those others disappear? Well, I'm going to suggest to you that if you try the 10 Commandments, they work. When you don't kill people, life is better, right? When you don't lie, things go better. Don't you think so? Right. There's just some things that work there. Well, I want to also suggest the reason that tithe has stuck throughout all the ages is because something works there. And we got to make that connection between the fact of tool is a powerful money. There has never been a time when there wasn't some form of money. It might have been chickens at some point, but it was a form of money. It created an economy. And God has not supplied churches with golden gooses yet. But He has supplied it with a lot of people. And He's blessed us with a lot of things. And He's also given us a huge opportunity to do something fantastic. And I remember when someone raised their hand in youth pastor class in college and asked one of the probably dumbest but most profound questions I've ever heard. He said to the professor, so tell me, how much ministry can you do for $100? You probably know the answer to that, right? About $100 worth, right? And suddenly it all makes sense. When you really think about it. Because we live in a world of disillusionment where we somehow believe, and I think this is true, not just in the church world, if I give a dime, I should get $1. We just have that expectation of my input should be minimal to my expectation of the return. And I'm going to suggest to you this morning that most times in life, when you give $1, you're going to get $1 pretty much back. There are times when maybe you give $1 and the Seahawks win the Super Bowl and you'll get much more back, right? Okay? But there are more times than not when what you put in is what you should expect to get out. But we seem to be in this point where we're always in this adventure of missing that point. You know, Jesus said it best when he walked the earth, and I don't even know if we as a nation get this. When he was questioned over and over about what should we do with our money, he had 2 things to say. He said, give to Caesar, which is government. Give to the government what is the government's, and give to God what is God's. Seems pretty simple, right? We live in a nation where, I don't know if I believe Romney or someone else, but we do know for a fact 50 to 62% of our nation doesn't even pay taxes. And do they have an expectation of our government? Of course not. They're just here to help everybody out. Right? Okay. And I think that somehow that mindset, and you can call it entitlement or whatever you want, bleeds over to everything else we do in life, because we have the Walmart effect to everything else where I want to minimize what my sacrifice is, but I maximize my expectation of return. And that gap right there keeps us from bringing one of the most powerful tools into the church that we need to be able to minister to people. If you want to do $100 in ministry, you just need $100. If you want to transform a city, it's going to cost more than $100. If you want to change people's lives, it's just going to cost some money. And it's not because anyone's getting rich. Last I checked, Mike's still eating macaroni and top ramen. I'm going to make sure it stays that way, guys. That's the way pastors should live. Yeah. No, it's a joke. You guys get that, right? All right. So the Bible has a lot to say about money, and I'm sure you're aware of this, because if you've been to a Dave Ramsey class or anything like that, one of the first things that's ever brought up is if you take the Bible, there's 500 verses about faith, and that's a lot of verses. 500. And then there's 700 verses about prayer. And I don't think anyone in this room would argue that prayer is powerful, correct? Right. So then it's shocking when you come to this point. In the Bible, there are over 5,000 verses that have to do with money, possessions, and general assets that you and I have. And at that point, I stop and think, and I also believe, just so you guys know, I don't believe God's in heaven wanting every dollar that he's given us back. It's just this. If there was going to be anything while we live on this earth that we were going to struggle with, I believe God knew it was going to be money, possessions, and general assets. We were going to struggle with those. And we would struggle with them in a lot of ways. And I think he did his best to give us the direction that we need. Him and Dave Ramsey. All right? So what I want to share with you, though, is just a couple passages of verses today that I think are very good. There are some, like anytime we talk about tithe, I married a pastor's daughter. And I know that what you're thinking right now, that they're always wild. Oh, yeah. Why, you think I married her? Come on. Seriously, guys. Think real for a second, all right? So, but anytime we have this conversation, because through college, I honestly kind of struggled with the concept of tithe, because I wondered why Jesus never mentioned it, why Paul never mentioned it in the New Testament, and why in Malachi it just kind of ended. But my father-in-law would always focus on Malachi 3, 8 through 10. Will a man rob God? And I was honestly, is it all right just to be transparent at this point? I mean, in college, I was like, well, I didn't feel like I was robbing God. No, I'm not robbing God. Yeah, you robbed me. And he would go through this, and he was very passionate about you need to bring in your 10% tithe. And you want to know the truth? I don't even have a problem with 10%. I figure I'm fortunate at 10% because that leaves 90 for me to play Xbox games with and several other things at that point. Actually, at that point, it was Nintendo. You guys would feel so deprived today. So there was all those things. It was just the concept of why. Why? And I just never felt like I got the why. I always just got the rule. And so I did some study, and I found Deuteronomy 14, 24 through 26, and I still remember when I was over at my girlfriend's house, who was a pastor's daughter. Crazy. And then I found Deuteronomy 14, 24 through 26. I love it. It says, but if the place God, your God, designates for worship is too far away, and you can't carry your tithe that far, God, your God, will still bless you. Exchange your tithe for money and take that money to the place God, your God, has chosen to be worshipped. Use the money to buy anything you want. Cattle, sheep, wine, or beer. Anything that looks good to you. I'm not kidding you. This is there. You can look it up. And you and your family can then feast in the presence of God, your God, and have a good time. I like that tithe program. It's out of context, guys. Just totally out. So, okay? There's nothing there. But what is in context for us this morning is this. It's not just the journey, okay? Because I want you to understand that if churches were businesses, probably within the next month, 85% of them would be out. And because in all the years that I spent preparing to be a pastor, how many business or just understanding of economy and finances classes did I go to? About -3, right? I mean, there was just no help. And instead, I felt like I almost got the opposite of money should never be an issue. Money's always there. Money's always available. And I believe those things are true. But until we, as those who are a part of this place and a part of this great church, those who are followers of Christ can make that connection that money is a powerful tool that God blesses us with so that we can use it to change the world we live in, we'll forever think it's for things that aren't like that. So in Corinthians, Paul said this. He said, this is chapter 9, verses 6 through 12. Here is something to remember. The one who plants only a little will gather only a little. And the one who plants a lot will gather a lot. You should each give what you have decided in your heart to give. You shouldn't give if you don't want to. You shouldn't give because you are forced to. God does love a cheerful giver. And God is able to shower all kinds of blessings on you. In all things and at all times, you will have everything you need. Boy, that's an important word. Remember, need. Isn't it true? I mean, who in this room today doesn't have what you need? There's things I could use, yeah. But need. You will do more and more good works. And it is written, they have spread their gifts around to poor people. Their good works continue forever. That's in Psalms 112. God supplies seed to the planter. He supplies bread for food. God will always supply and increase the amount of your seed. He will increase the results of your good works, and you will be made rich in every way. Can we agree on one thing? There's a lot of ways to be rich besides a lot of money in the bank, right? Isn't that true? It's really true. I mean, how many of us don't have 100 things to be grateful for right now? But we thought about the 10 things we're not grateful for all morning long. That's psychological right there, just so you know. I can't find it in the Bible, but it's true. It's true. Then you came... Guys, I'm married to a psychologist, so that's legal, okay? Come on. She's crazy, too. Then you can always give freely. You will take your many gifts to the people who need them, and they will give thanks to God. Your gifts meet the needs of God's people. And that's not all. Your gifts also cause many people to thank God. There's a huge thing that's happening right there that I think we often miss out on. And if it's okay with you, because there's a lot of gifts we could talk about this morning. I mean, we all have time, we have resources, but the money is the one that's going to be very important to us. Because where you are, we're a church that's in infancy still. Most churches fail because money. There's just not enough to push the church to the next level of ministry. There's just not. But I'm just going to suggest something. And you know what? I want you to know something. I'm just as guilty as anyone else in this room. I'm sure that I could cut some things out and give more to the journey and so forth. But consider this. There's not a person in this room. I mean, you can look around the room. I mean, if you want to go ahead and look at everybody around you, make them feel like they're awkward and stuff. So. But everyone in this room, this is a shocking reality for us. Hold up your phone. Your phone is actually worth more than what 20% of the world makes in a year. It's worth more than what 45% of the world makes in a month. It's crazy what blessings we have. And I don't know anybody that doesn't have a nice phone. I know some crazy people using flip phones, and I don't know why. But, we are so blessed. It's safe to say that you could take anyone in this room, and if you take us to several other world areas, you would be considered amongst the most wealthy. You would be. There's just no reason for us to not be a grateful person and not make a connection of the opportunity that we do have. I like what Winston Churchill said. He said, we make a living by what we get, but we make a life by what we give. And I think oftentimes we stop before we get to the second half of that saying and just think about we make a life by what we get. And I did grow up in a household that was very good to me and did say to me often, you get what you put into something is what you're going to get out of something. Because I often did have this idea, and maybe it was just me, because I will admit that I probably needed counseling at a young age. But I would go and think that if I practiced for 2 hours before baseball tryouts, I should make the team. Right? I mean, was anyone else that way? I would go and think if I studied for 10 minutes, I should be able to get an A on this test. Sometimes it worked out, but it was because it was multiple choice, and you already know the rules of multiple choice, right? 50% of the time it's A. So you see, this all fed into my head, and the essence of it is that I always learned to believe that I should expect more than I give. The most shocking day in my life is when I moved out. Isn't that the truth? Who else had that experience where suddenly you realize money isn't just magic beans. I actually have to pay utilities, house, and all of these things. Things have to be taken care of. And somehow I actually lived in a state of awkwardness in my parents' house, believing that things just took care of themselves. Because I didn't have to actually write the check. I didn't have to pay the bill. I didn't have to go pay. When we went grocery shopping, I just thought there was a never-ending limit to that checkbook. For my kids, it's probably a debit card. When they were young, they're not this way as older, as teenagers, but when they were young, if we needed something, we might say something like, well, we can't get that right now. Well, just get that card out. That's a child's way of looking at it, but I think that child's way of looking at money is coming to adulthood in a lot of ways, in that we've lost the connection from, if we want to do this, we're going to have to put the work and the tools in place that are going to fund this. And doing that is going to take each one of us being openly considering of what can I sacrifice to get there. It's pretty simple. In the times we put a garden together this year, and that was fun. But every seed that we plant, it was kind of fun for me. All right, if we're completely honest, yeah. But it's safe to say what we planted grew. It did. When we put seeds in the ground, we had the expectations of, we're going to have tomatoes, we're going to have this. And it happened. It totally happened. And it took a lot of things, though. First of all, we had to buy special soil. I don't know if anyone has done that. That's crazy. You're buying cow manure. And I thought, there's probably places you can get that for free, right? And you know what I'm saying? So anyways, we bought all this stuff. We put it together, made sure everything was there. It took time, money, resources, and then we had to continually watch it. But the results of it were equal to the time that was put in. Almost 100%. Meaning that if I had just put seeds in the ground, I probably would have gotten nothing. But the fact that everything was in place to make it worked. And I would love to just have the grocery store mentality in all things in life, where if I want tomatoes, tomatoes just magically appear. Okay, so in the church world, though, I want you to think about this. We often think that things are of exception. Remember when we talked about that a few minutes ago? We always have things we would like to see. And I don't know the conversations that Mike has with all of you, so if I say something that sounds like it, it's because he told me. No, I'm kidding. It's because I've heard it before, probably. But I remember there was a lot of good ideas in a church. There always was. But sometimes good ideas become almost like my purpose for coming to this church. And I would have people come into my office and say, well, Chris, why aren't we doing this? And it would be pretty simple, as I could pull out and say, well, right now we just don't have the budget for it. We just don't have the time for it and these things. But we need to be doing this. Okay. Can you relate to that sometimes? I mean, guys, if we're completely transparent right now in the seats, somebody's thinking Mike should be doing something. Andy Stanley said it best. He passes out a survey to everyone in his leadership group once a quarter. And the first question is this: if you were the pastor right now, what would you do? Because he realized most of them thought they were. It was the best thing he ever did. But what it also did is it finally got everybody in the position where they finally understood that the things that I believe should be happening can only happen when we're all on the same page. Yeah, in direction, but there's things that still have to happen. If we literally want to transform a neighborhood, you've got to have the time, money, and people to do it. If you literally want to see a building that can house more, let's call them ministries, things that actually help people, it's going to take time, people, and even more money. And it's not because anyone wants to hound us for more money, more money, more money. It's this: the larger our vision, the more resources it's going to take. The more that we want to do, the more glory that we want to build in this place that God can do things with, it's going to take more. And we might run into some blessings in the way, like we had someone give us gravel. Now, anyone who knows what gravel costs, that was huge, but does that remove it? That's not magic beans. That's someone living generously. And that's how it works. And that's the point we really need to get to. I'm going to suggest to you that tithing is easy compared to generosity. So much easier. Because when you live generously, that's a different way of living. It's actually deciding that there's some things I'm going to deny myself so that I can give to others and give towards other things that affect others. It's actually not a budget thing anymore. It's actually being willing to abandon something to give to something. Living generously means that instead of just looking out for myself, I'm now equally looking out for the good of others. Tithing is almost like a budget item. Generously can be huge. Remember the guy that came to Jesus and said, "Jesus, what would it take for me to follow you?" And he had one problem. He was rich. Is it horrible to be rich? You know what? I'll try it out. I seriously give it a shot. No, I'm just saying this. I don't think the rich was the problem. That wasn't the problem in this case. Let's think this through. End of the road here. We know what it takes when Jesus walked the earth to follow him. Where did that thing end up? He kind of died. I don't know if you remember that, but everybody was alone. Nothing left. This kind of journey was going to take everything. Meaning if there was anything holding you back, you wouldn't have completed this. You would have went home. You certainly would have. So Jesus' response to the rich man was this: hey, if you really want to follow me on this journey, you're going to have to give everything up to come follow me. Everything? Everything? Yeah, everything. Is it because he had a problem with the money this guy had? No. Was it going to hold him back from really following on this journey? Absolutely. You're going to have to give that up. And in one way or another, that's what we deal with as a church family. We can let our reasons get in the way. Because here's the truth: whether it's business, athletics, church, or whatever, you're always going to have reasons or results, but you can never have both. And for this guy, the money was too much. I can't give this up. Okay, we look at that and say, wow, I can kind of, maybe you could say I could relate to that, because I honestly can. But think about this. What did this guy miss out on? The one event that if I had a time machine, I'd want to go see it. Right? I mean, aren't you there? If you could walk with anybody on earth, wouldn't it be Jesus? He could have. The 12 might have been 13 for all we know. Or it would have been stopped early, and he would have had to kick someone out of the 12. I think I would have chose Peter, but anyways. You understand what I'm saying? I mean, there was this that had to be happen. I mean, just don't be fooled. If you have the idea that the journey should be a powerful, impacting force in the city of Boise, it takes something to do that. And that something is always going to be the things that are hardest to talk about: your time, your resources, and your money. And it's not because Mike's got plans to drive a new Jaguar. They need repaired all the time anyway. Terrible choice. But there's so many things that are good. They're good. How much ministry can we do with the leftover $600 every month after we pay for lights, salaries, and everything else? About $600. That's what we can do. Here's the next question. How much difference in a valley of 700,000 can $700 make? About $700. We got to make a shift. And the shift's got to be something like this. It's got to be in the attitude, and I'm included, in the attitude of being willing to say, man, if we're going to make a $3,000 difference this week, I got to figure out how to be a part of that. I really do. Maybe right now for us, it's if I want to make sure the lights are on next week, I like worship in the dark, but it means I got to figure out how to be a part of the solution to this. I've got to do that, and I have to make that decision, and I'm going to have to stick to it. And it's got to be an attitude like Paul talked about in 1 Corinthians. It's got to be one where I've decided to do it, I'm going to do it. Any waffling or anything like that's going to have to disappear. Because waffling is really just a form of confusion, removes me from responsibility. Because if I waffle on it, then it's okay for me to do nothing. No arm twisting. I mean, there's got to be a point where people have to stop asking me to step up, because that gets tiring. There's so many other things we could be doing besides that. It's got to get to the point where, as an individual who says I'm a part of the journey, and I believe that the journey is here to make a difference in Boise, Idaho, whether that starts right here in this building and goes from there, or whether it starts in the neighborhood next door, I'm going to do what I can within my time, money, and resources to contribute to it. And I'm going to make it so that you don't have to twist my arm, and I'm going to do it. I'm just going to do it. And what that's going to take is probably, for me, something like this. My wife and I need to sit down, and we need to be honest about this is where we are at. And this is what we can do. And you might say in your head, well, I don't even know if I can do 10% right now. You know what? I'm convinced that God is not in heaven saying, you're not blessed until you get to 10%. I'm convinced he's in heaven saying, even if it's this much, just do something, because this much, and this much is now that much. And it's going to make all the difference in the world. So I'm making up my mind. I don't want my leadership of my church to waste any more time asking me for it. I just want us to be able to go. And I'm going to take responsibility, too, for the result. Meaning that if things are not happening in this church the way I think they should, I'm not going to look for someone to blame, because that's the easiest thing to do. I love it because we already know whose fault it is if it doesn't go right. It's Mike's. So let's just say it. All right? It's his fault. Well, let's just move past that and say, okay, it's his fault, but let's do it anyway. I'm going to guarantee you, when you got a leader with supporters that are just going to go, it'll go. It's going to go. And it's going to get to a point where we can now focus on the things that I think everybody in this room wants to do. We want to do things that changes the lives of other people, right? And our own. I don't think there's anyone here who's going, I can't wait to go to church today to experience nothing life-changing. I hope today we don't address anything that actually forces me to grow as a person. Yeah. Well, at least there's one of us that's that way. No, we come here because we believe something great can happen. And that something great can happen, but it's going to need to be something that we decide is our responsibility. And so at this point, here's the question we've got to consider individually, maybe as a family. You consider, what can you do? God's not asking you to be silly. He's not asking you to do something that you can't do. He's just asking you, what can you do? And is it fair to say, is there something in your life right now that you could give up and we could funnel it here and put it towards something good? In my life, I'm probably no one can look at my checkbook but me, all right? No, I'm serious. I jokingly say that, but it's true. I probably look at it and go, oh my word, there are several things I could do differently. What are you willing to do that isn't silly, but may be a stretch? I don't think God's into silly. He's into what's possible, and let's go. If it's possible to look at the whole of everything, if we all in this room, that's just here this morning, and the people who aren't here, we'll send them notes, and we'll probably go visit them, and then we'll have them get their taxes out. So, no, I'm totally kidding, but that does happen in some realms, guys. So, all right. So, but if we in this room, just for a moment, said, okay, I'm going to take you up on that. I'm just going to take an hour today. And whether it's by yourself or with another decision maker in your house, we just figure out, what can we do? What can we do? And then make a commitment to do it. That's all it's going to take. And if we did that for the next year, we all might be here next year. I hate to say it, surprised by what God can do with that kind of sacrifice. Maybe just a bit surprised. Because I do believe this, that God honors the sacrifice of his people. He really does. You know, and I've been around the folks that think you got to go to China and put your life on the line before God blesses you. I've seen that. But I've also been around more opportunities where a bunch of people made the decision, and together their efforts made a massive difference. Massive difference in the lives of others. And it inspired them to do even more. And in that inspiration to do even more, it went from just this group of people to now this group of people. And then it got to the point where now it wasn't just this group of people. They actually jumped miles to where another group of people. And before you know it, are you guys familiar with Mars Hill Church in Seattle? Huge. It started with a church smaller than this. And now is transforming literally so many areas in Seattle. It's mind-boggling. Oh, it's kind of a news flash, I know. Do you know why Boise is considered the number 2 best place to plant a church in the United States? Is because they don't see any churches beyond the LDS churches that are on every corner that is doing anything to impact the city of Boise. Meaning this, everybody who's at church today could not fill all the seats in our arenas and stadiums. And there's 700,000 people in this valley. Now, I'm not saying that only churchgoers go to heaven or anything. That's not the point. The point is the people who have a commitment of some sort to seeing good things happen in Boise can't fill our meeting places outside of the churches. There is so much opportunity in Boise. There's so much opportunity for us as the journey. There's so much opportunity for you. And really it's going to begin when all of us decide to make that shift to generosity instead of expectation. Because all of us can come every Sunday and expect to be some way served. Or we can come every Sunday generously prepared to give. Because when you give, guess what happens? You receive. You receive. There has never been a point in my life, and there's been times that I've been on mission trips or anything like that, and I thought, oh, what an inconvenience. But I've never come back from one and said, oh, that was a waste of time. I've always come back and said, oh, my word, I should have just wanted to go from the start. It's to the point, even like this, maybe you can relate. How many of you have ever not wanted to exercise? Pretty much everyone, right? Yeah, I know. But I've never exercised and said, oh, that was horrible. I should have never done that. Yeah. How many of you have wanted to just save money? And then you do it, and you do it, and you do it, and you get the savings account to that $1,000 that Ramsey wants, so now you're not on his blacklist. Yeah. And then, for those of you who don't know who Dave Ramsey is, he's the financial peace gentleman that drove me to counseling, but it's all right. But who regrets that? I mean, seriously, do you ever regret that? I can never look back and say, you know, honey, I really wish we hadn't put the energy into saving that money. It's just sitting there. I'm going to suggest to you that when we as a group make commitments as a church, there's never going to be a point where we get together on a Sunday and say, hey, you know that extra sacrifice I figured out that's allowed us to do more, change more lives, be more aggressive about sharing a good news message? Yeah, I regret that. It won't happen. It won't happen. We'll be too busy being excited about what's happening to have any regret. In 1 Timothy 6, Paul writes to Timothy, says this, command people who are rich in this world to not be proud. That seems like great advice. Tell them to not put their hope in riches. Again, great advice. Wealth is uncertain, and anyone in Boise that was in real estate knows that. Command those who are rich to put their hope in God. He richly provides us with everything to enjoy. Command the rich to do what is good. Tell them to be rich in good things. They must give freely. They must be willing to share. And in that way, they will put riches away for themselves, but it will provide a firm basis for the next life, and they will take hold of that life that really is life. In a world perspective, there isn't a rich person. There's nothing but rich people in this room, even if you don't feel like one. We have been blessed with more resources than any other generation to walk the earth. So let's make a difference that no other generation on earth has ever seen. It's possible. Would you join me in just a quick prayer and we'll be done? And then we're going to pass the plates again. I'm joking. Jesus, I just want to thank you for the fact that you do treat us well and that we are blessed. And we lived in a blessed nation. We lived in a blessed time. And we were abundant in resources. But I can also acknowledge as a person that lives in this time, there are times I don't feel that way. And my prayer is simple. God, I just pray that you would remove from myself and anyone else that feels that way, that feeling. That I would just get out of the way and do the work. Take responsibility. And live a generous life. There are some things I can do. And God, I know you haven't invited anyone in this room to be silly or do something crazy. But you have invited everyone in this room to be a part of something bigger than ourselves. Because when we all figure out what we can do and we put it together, it has an incredible effect. Has an incredible result. I pray we would be a people that is completely motivated by the result that we know is possible instead of by the exception we believe we deserve. And the invitation to be a part of that might be strong in our life. Because the easiest thing to do would be to walk through the doors now and do nothing. But might we have the courage, the honesty, and the integrity with ourselves to do what we can. Because essentially all you ever asked for, God, was